The display on the obsidian glass smartphone lit up, cutting through the shadows of the study with a harsh violet glare. It was an unrecognized number, a series of digits that shouldn't have been able to bypass the Alpha King's private firewall. Dominic Vance didn't take interruptions. As the ruler of the Northern Territories, his time was measured in life-or-death decisions and the delicate balance of pack politics. He reached out, his long, scarred fingers hovering over the decline button, fully intending to have the caller tracked and erased within the hour. But then his wolf stirred, a low visceral rumble in his chest that felt less like irritation and more like a warning. He swiped to accept. "Please. You have to hurry," a voice whimpered. It was tiny, breathless, and saturated with the kind of primal terror that usually only came from the brink of death. "She's not waking up. She's on the street and she's so cold. She promised she'd stay with me, but she's not talking anymore." "Who is this?" Dominic growled, his voice a lethal rasp that usually sent lesser wolves scurrying. "I'm Sam," the child sobbed, the sound muffled by the rush of wind against the microphone. "I found her by the old bridge on Miller Road. He's my girl. He's my best friend. You have to come. You're the only one who can help because you're the king, right? That's what the posters say. Please hurry or she's going to go away forever." The line went dead before Dominic could demand an explanation. "Oh, my friends. It is so wonderful to have you here with us today. Whether you're tuning in from the bustling streets of New York, the quiet beauty of the countryside, or anywhere else in this vast, connected world, thank you for being part of this journey. Before we dive into the heart of this mystery, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single second, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and turned on those notifications. If you're enjoying the suspense so far, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. We're building something special here and I'd love for you to stay until the very end." Dominic didn't hesitate. He didn't call his guards. He didn't notify his council. He didn't even grab his coat. The connection to the caller, this strange, desperate child, had sent a jolt of static through his nerves that felt like a jagged lightning strike. He pushed off his desk, the heavy mahogany chair toppling behind him, and shifted into his stride. He arrived at the outskirts of Miller Road in record time, his inner wolf pacing behind his ribs, scratching at the bars of his restraint. The deserted street was a graveyard of broken asphalt and rusted streetlights that flickered with dying hums. There, huddled beneath the skeleton of a withered oak tree, was a small silhouette. A little boy, no older than 6, was crouched over a heap of shadows. As Dominic's heavy boots crunched on the gravel, the child didn't run. He stood up, his small body trembling violently, arms spread wide as if to shield the form behind him from the looming predator approaching from the dark. "I called the king," the boy whispered, his eyes wide and glassy with unshed tears. "I called because you said you protect the weak. Please. She's right there." Dominic stepped into the pool of dim, flickering light, his heart hammering a rhythm he hadn't felt in a decade. He looked down. There, lying motionless against the cracked pavement, was a woman. Her skin was the color of moonlight, her hair a tangle of dark silk draped over her shoulders. She looked fragile, shattered, and utterly alien. Dominic dropped to his knees, his hands hovering inches above her shoulder. The moment his skin neared hers, the air in the alleyway seemed to thicken, pressurized by an invisible force. His wolf didn't just growl. It let out a shattered, mournful howl that vibrated in his very marrow. She wasn't just a girl found on the street. She was the scent of ozone and crushed violets. She was the missing half of a soul he had spent his entire life believing was a myth. How could a 6-year-old boy, standing in the middle of a nowhere road, be the guardian of the one thing Dominic had been searching for his entire life? And as he reached out to brush a stray lock of hair from her pale, unresponsive face, he realized with a sickening jolt of dread that she wasn't just unconscious. She was dying. Dominic's fingers finally brushed against her neck, hunting for a pulse. It was faint, a butterfly's wing fluttering against a tombstone, but it was there. His wolf surged, desperate to pour its own life force into her, to mend the broken tether between their spirits. "Don't," the boy Sam breathed, his voice cracking. He didn't sound like a child anymore. There was a haunting maturity in his tone. "She doesn't like cold things. You're too cold, King." Dominic looked up, his predatory instincts warring with a sudden, protective ache. He scanned the boy. Sam was dressed in rags, his knees stained with dirt and dried, dark patches that looked suspiciously like someone else's blood. He was the picture of vulnerability, yet his posture, the way he stood between the most dangerous creature in the territory and his fallen companion, spoke of a devotion that bordered on the fanatical. "Who is she, Sam?" Dominic asked, his voice steadying though his heart was a frantic drum. "How do you know my name? How did you get my private number?" Sam looked down at the woman, his small hand gently stroking her limp fingers. "Her name is Evelyn. She doesn't talk about where she comes from. She just says she was waiting for a sound. A howl. She told me if the bad men ever caught us, I should call the only man who knows how to listen to the wind." Dominic's stomach tightened. The bad men. He surveyed the surroundings with his heightened senses. There were no tracks, no lingering scent of rogue wolves, yet the air felt heavy with the residue of a spell, a lingering bitter taste of silver and dark magic. If you're feeling the tension building, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. It really helps the channel grow, and I love seeing you all in the comments, so let me know your theories. Who do you think Evelyn really is? Dominic gathered her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. She was as fragile as glass, yet the moment she touched his chest, a spark hot and searing, arced between them. It wasn't just a mating bond, it was a reactivation. Her eyelids fluttered, a soft, involuntary moan escaping her lips, and for a split second her eyes snapped open. They weren't human. They were swirling galaxies of iridescent gold, shifting and dimming like a dying star. "Dominic," she whispered. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm, melodic yet terrified. She knew him. "I have you," he murmured, his voice dropping to a protective, guttural rumble. He turned to Sam, his eyes softening. "Come with us, Sam. We are leaving. Now." He surged upward, his speed unnatural as he sprinted toward his waiting transport, which had been summoned by his silent, internal command. As he laid her across the plush leather seat, he caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. There was a jagged, angry mark on the back of her neck. A brand. It wasn't a pack mark. It was a sigil of containment. He realized then that Evelyn hadn't been abandoned. She had been imprisoned. Dominic looked at Sam, who had climbed into the passenger seat with the solemnity of a soldier. The boy was staring at his own hands, his small frame shaking with a mixture of relief and lingering terror. "They're coming for her," Sam whispered, not looking at the alpha. "They don't like it when she hears the music. They said she's broken, but she's not. She's just waiting to wake up." Dominic accelerated, the engine roaring like a caged beast. He had spent his life ruling with iron and ice, fearing nothing. But as he watched the woman he had just realized was his destiny drifting toward an abyss he couldn't see, he felt the first cold needle of true fear pierce his armor. He was the king, yes. But in the quiet, suffocating darkness of the car, he felt like a pawn in a game he was only just beginning to understand. And the worst part? The woman in his lap was starting to hum, a low, discordant tune that made the very air around them crackle with electricity. The drive to the obsidian spire, Dominic's mountain fortress, was a blur of frozen landscapes and his own mounting dread. Every few minutes he glanced at the rearview mirror. Evelyn was still, her breathing shallow, but the humming had stopped. Instead, the air around her smelled of ozone, like the aftermath of a massive lightning strike. Beside her, young Sam sat with his hands folded in his lap, staring out the window with an unnerving, vacant intensity. "She's quiet now," Sam whispered. The static stopped. Dominic gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. "Who are they, Sam? Who branded her?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, his eyes widened and he pointed a small, trembling finger toward the dark canopy of the forest lining the highway. "Look, the silver trees." Dominic slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded, tires shrieking against the frozen asphalt, and came to a violent halt in the center of the road. He didn't need to look at the trees to know what was happening. He could feel it, a sudden biting cold that had nothing to do with the winter night. A wall of silver energy, translucent and lethal, had materialized across the road ahead of them. It was a containment field designed to stop anything with a pulse from passing. As it flared, the forest erupted in sound. Not the howls of wolves but the rhythmic, mechanical clicking of hunters. Are you guys feeling the pressure yet? This is the moment where everything changes. Before we see if Dominic can break through, I want to take a quick second to ask. Have you subscribed yet? If you're loving this story, hit that button and let me know in the comments. What do you think is waiting for them behind that silver wall? Dominic didn't wait. He shifted. The sound of his bones snapping into place was a thunderclap in the silent night. He burst out of the driver's side door, his form expanding, fur shifting into a coat of midnight black. His wolf, a creature of pure ancient power, surged forward with a singular, desperate mandate: protect her. He lunged toward the wall of silver. The moment he hit it, a shockwave of agony threw him backward. His skin smoked where the barrier touched him, and his wolf shrieked in his mind. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a cage meant for her. He pulled himself up, fur matted with his own blood, and let out a roar that shattered the remaining streetlights for miles. The forest went silent. From the shadows, 3 figures emerged. They didn't move like men. They moved like puppets on invisible strings, their eyes glowing with the same cold, synthetic light that had flickered in the barrier. Alpha King, one of them said, his voice a chorus of overlapping, distorted tones. You have retrieved the vessel. Return it, and your territory will be spared the blight. Vessel. Dominic growled, his voice a deep, gravel-filled rumble that shook the ground. He stood between the entities and his car, his fangs bared, blood dripping onto the snow. She is not a vessel. She is a woman. And she is mine. The entities stepped forward in perfect unison. She is a defect. A glitch in the fabric of the kingdom. She belongs to the silence. The lead entity raised a hand, and the silver wall expanded, rushing toward the car like a tsunami of liquid metal. Dominic's instincts screamed. He could fight these things, but he couldn't protect Evelyn and Sam while doing it. He had a split-second choice: stand his ground and likely die, or attempt a reckless, impossible maneuver to break the seal by force. He chose the latter. He didn't charge the entities. He charged the space between them, leaping into the heart of the silver wall. As he collided with the barrier, he felt his own internal energy, the ancient burning spark of his bloodline, clash against the cold, dead magic of the attackers. He forced the transformation, pushing his body to the breaking point, a surge of raw, untamed power exploding from him. The wall shattered like glass. The resulting blast threw him through the air, crashing him into the trunk of a pine tree. He was dazed, vision blurring, but he heard a sound that made his heart stop. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was a laugh. He looked toward the car. Evelyn was sitting up. Her eyes were no longer gold. They were a blinding, terrifying white, and she was looking directly at the entities with an expression of pure, unbridled authority. "You think you can bind a storm?" she asked, her voice echoing with a power that Dominic had only ever read about in forbidden scrolls. With a wave of her hand, the 3 entities disintegrated into piles of gray ash. She slumped back against the seat, her eyes rolling back, and she collapsed again. But as she fell, she caught Dominic's gaze. She wasn't just a victim. She was something far more dangerous, and the Alpha King had just dragged the storm into his own home. The drive back to the Obsidian Spire was no longer a rescue mission. It was a race against a clock that Dominic couldn't even see. The silence in the car had become heavy, charged with the ozone scent of Evelyn's dormant power. Beside her, Sam sat with his small hands folded perfectly over his knees, his face devoid of the earlier terror, replaced by a stoic, almost ancient watchfulness. "You shouldn't have broken the seal, Alpha," Sam said softly, his voice cutting through the hum of the engine. Dominic didn't take his eyes off the road, though his pulse was drumming a frantic, irregular rhythm against his collar. "I didn't have a choice. Those things were going to take her." "They weren't taking her back to a prison," Sam replied, his eyes fixed on the unconscious woman. "They were taking her back to the source. Once she touches the source again, she won't remember the wind. She won't remember me. Or you." Dominic felt a cold pit form in his stomach. He glanced at Evelyn. Her skin was paler than before, the faint, shimmering veins beneath her translucent flesh pulsing with a soft, bioluminescent blue. Every mile they put between them and the site of the attack felt like a violation of some unspoken cosmic law. "We're entering the eye of the storm now, and things are only getting more intense from here. If you're loving this wild ride, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens when they finally reach the spire. And hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Why do you think Sam is so protective of her? What's their connection? Let's get a discussion going." As they pulled into the iron-wrought gates of the spire, the pack guards stood at attention, their eyes widening at the sight of the battered Alpha. Dominic didn't stop for reports. He scooped Evelyn into his arms, feeling that electric searing heat flare against his skin, and marched directly toward his private quarters. He laid her on the silk-draped bed, the room instantly cooling as if her presence was a temperature control mechanism. He turned to signal for his healer, but Sam was already there, hovering by the bedside with a small worn satchel. "Don't call the healers," the boy warned, his voice low and firm. "They'll only see a monster. They won't see the melody." "She's bleeding internally, Sam," Dominic snapped, his patience fraying. "She needs care." "She needs the truth," Sam retorted. The next 3 days were a descent into a waking dream. Evelyn didn't wake, but the spire began to change. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist, forming intricate, moving patterns on the walls. The pack members outside the doors began to report strange phenomena. The wind in the mountains sounded like a woman humming, and the local wildlife had stopped hunting, gathering instead in a silent, reverent circle around the base of the tower. Dominic spent his nights sitting at the foot of her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. His romantic obsession had blossomed into something more terrifying, a desperate, clawing need to understand her. He found himself tracing the brand on her neck, his own wolf whining in submission whenever he touched the jagged, glowing lines. One evening, as the moon turned a deep, blood red, Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. But she didn't look at him. She looked through him, her gaze fixed on the balcony door. "They're calling again," she whispered, her voice raspier than before. Dominic stood up, his hand reflexively going to the hilt of the blade he kept hidden under his tunic. "Who? The entities?" "No," she breathed, sitting up with a fluid, unnatural grace. She reached out, her fingers brushing his jaw, and he felt a jolt that nearly brought him to his knees. "The ones who wrote the story. They're trying to edit the ending." Outside, the sky cracked. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of reality tearing open, revealing a glimpse of a vast golden light that shouldn't have been there. From that tear, a figure stepped out, not a rogue, not a guard, but a man who bore the exact chilling resemblance to the entities that had attacked them, only this one was dressed in high, regal robes. "Evelyn of the Lost Verse," the figure announced, his voice booming across the mountains. "Your time in the periphery is over. The Alpha's narrative has been compromised. Surrender the child and the girl, or the story ends tonight." Dominic felt his wolf surge, his claws extending. He knew this wasn't just a battle for territory anymore. It was a battle for their very existence. And as he looked at Evelyn, she stood up, her eyes once again glowing that terrifying, beautiful white. "Dominic," she said, her voice layering into a chorus. "Whatever happens, don't let them take the boy." The figure standing on the balcony was not made of flesh and blood. He was composed of shifting, static-filled light, a glitch in the world's fabric. He called himself the Archivist, and as he moved into the room, the walls of the spire began to dissolve into lines of shimmering golden script. Dominic roared, lunging forward with a speed that blurred the air, his claws aimed at the Archivist's throat. But he passed right through him, stumbling into the terrace railing. The Archivist didn't even flinch. He merely turned his gaze toward Evelyn, who stood perfectly still, her hair floating as if caught in a zero-gravity storm. "Evelyn," the Archivist said, his voice cold and devoid of empathy. "You were never meant to be a protagonist. You were a background asset, a narrative contingency designed to facilitate the Alpha's growth. Your consciousness is a corruption of the code." Dominic scrambled to his feet, shielding Evelyn with his own body. "She is not a code. She is a living, breathing woman." Evelyn's hand moved, and she rested it firmly on Dominic's shoulder. The contact sent a jolt of such profound intimacy through his mind that he saw flashes of 1,000 lifetimes they had never actually lived, lives where they were lovers, enemies, strangers, and gods. "He's right, Dominic," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a dying star. "I was an asset. But I woke up. We have hit the absolute peak of the mystery, and I hope you're as breathless as I am. If you're still with me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We have so much more ground to cover and the twists are just getting started. Drop a comment below. What do you think is going to happen now that they know the truth about their world? Let's keep this conversation moving." She stepped forward, her eyes fixated on the Archivist. With a fluid, hypnotic movement, she reached into her own chest, not tearing through skin, but reaching into the shimmering space where her heart should have been. She pulled out a fragment of raw, pulsing light, a story seed. "You think you wrote us," she said, her voice resonant and absolute. "But you only created the parameters. The emotion, the love, the fear, the desperation, that was mine. That was ours." She slammed the light into the floor of the balcony. A massive shockwave of golden energy erupted, shattering the archivist's form into a million jagged pixels. The entire room went dark. The spire, the mountains, and even the stars in the night sky flickered like a dying television set. Dominic collapsed to his knees, his mind reeling. The revelation hit him harder than any physical blow. The world he ruled, the pack he led, even his own memories of childhood, felt suddenly fragile and rehearsed. He looked at Evelyn, who was trembling, her light fading. She wasn't just a girl found on the street. She was the architect of the very narrative that held them all together. Sam ran to her, clutching her hand, his eyes burning with a defiance that mirrored hers. "He's not dead, Evelyn. He's just rebooting. The system is purging us." Dominic grabbed her hand, his skin searing against hers. The bond between them had intensified, transcending the physical. He could feel her thoughts. Every fear she had ever had about not being real, every drop of love she had felt for him in the seconds they had been together. "I don't care if this is a story or a simulation," Dominic growled, his resolve hardening into something indestructible. "If we are here, we are real. If we are bleeding, we are real. And I will burn this entire reality down before I let them delete you." The ground beneath them began to tear open, revealing a void of absolute, terrifying nothingness. The system was collapsing, and they were trapped in the wreckage of a reality that was actively trying to overwrite them. Evelyn looked at him, her golden eyes softening with a love that felt ancient and earned. "Then we don't play by the rules anymore, Dominic. We write our own." The world as they knew it didn't just break. It dissolved. The solid stone of the obsidian spire turned into flickering, translucent pixels of gray and black. Gravity began to fail, and the floor tilted at impossible angles, threatening to spill them into the yawning, hungry void beneath the tower. Dominic clawed at the stone, his fingers tearing through the simulated reality as if it were nothing more than wet paper. He lunged for Evelyn, catching her waist just as the floor beneath her disintegrated into static. She was colder than ice, her skin now translucent, the glowing veins pulsing with a frantic, stuttering rhythm. "Dominic," she gasped, her voice echoing as if she were trapped in a distant tunnel. "The purge. It's deleting everything that isn't essential to the script. It's coming for the memories. It's coming for us." Sam was huddled in the corner of what remained of the balcony, his small hands glowing with a soft, protective amber light, trying to anchor them to the remnants of their world. But his shield was failing. The edges of his form were blurring, his features softening into indistinct shapes. "Are you guys still with me? This is the moment where everything feels truly lost. The ultimate test of their bond. If you're feeling the weight of this scene, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the channel, and I promise we have a long, epic road ahead. Drop a comment. Do you think their love can survive in a world that's literally deleting them? I want to hear your theories." Dominic felt his own memories flickering like a dying candle. He remembered his mother's face, then it blurred. He remembered the first time he led the pack, then the memory vanished into white noise. The system was stripping him of his identity, his history, his very soul. The archivist, or what remained of his consciousness, reappeared not as a man, but as a towering, jagged monolith of obsidian and blinding light that filled the sky. "You are errors," the voice thundered, vibrating through the bones of the mountain. "You are unauthorized iterations. You will be recycled." Dominic looked at Evelyn. She was fading, her golden eyes dimming to a dull, metallic gray. The hero he had been, the strong, confident Alpha King, was being systematically erased, replaced by a hollow, soulless template. He felt the cold, creeping dread of absolute non-existence. He reached for her hand, but his own palm was disappearing, leaving behind only the sensation of air. "Sam," Dominic rasped, his own voice sounding distant like a recording played at the wrong speed. Hold on to her." "I can't," the boy shrieked, his small voice cracking. "The connection is severed. He's rewriting the laws of physics." The void surged upward, a tidal wave of nothingness that threatened to swallow the last of the spire. Evelyn looked at Dominic, her expression one of profound, agonizing love. She didn't look like a warrior or an architect anymore. She looked like a girl who had only just discovered what it meant to be alive, and was now being forced to give it up. "It was real," she whispered, her voice a fragile, dying note. "Even if he deletes it, we felt it, Dominic. We were real." She reached out, and for one fleeting, desperate heartbeat, their fingers interlaced. The shock of it, the raw, impossible intensity of their connection, momentarily held the void at bay. But the monolith descended, a wall of absolute erasure, slamming down upon them with the crushing force of a final edit. The lights went out. The sounds of the world, the wind, the stone, the heartbeat of the mountain were silenced. There was nothing. No light, no sound, no alpha, no girl, no boy. Only the terrifying, silent expanse of a story that had officially come to an end. In the hollow silence of the void, there was no time. There was only the fading echo of a heartbeat, Dominic's. He existed as a fragment of consciousness, a dying spark of defiance caught in the cold, unfeeling architecture of the system. He shouldn't have been able to feel anything, yet he could feel the ghost of Evelyn's hand against his, still warm, still tethered to his very core. "Are you guys still with me?" This is the moment where hope seems like a myth, but we're far from finished. If you're loving this emotional roller coaster, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button. It truly helps the channel keep stories like this coming. And tell me in the comments, do you think their love is powerful enough to rewrite the code itself? I want to read your theories. Within the nothingness, a sound emerged. It wasn't a roar and it wasn't a whisper. It was the rhythm of a lullaby, the same one Sam used to hum when they were on the road. It wasn't coming from the environment. It was coming from within the void. Dominic's consciousness surged. He focused on that sound, pouring every ounce of his remaining existence into the memory of Evelyn's touch. He realized then that the system could delete the story, but it couldn't delete the experience. The love he felt for her wasn't a script. It was a physical law, an immovable object that even the archivist's cold, synthetic logic couldn't erase. "Evelyn," he whispered, not with his voice but with his soul. Across the darkness, a flicker of gold ignited. It was small, no larger than a candle flame, but it was absolute. Evelyn was there, curled in the fetal position, her form flickering between existence and nullity. Beside her, Sam, who had been reduced to a mere silhouette of light, was vibrating with an intense amber frequency. The boy, Dominic realized, the truth hitting him with the force of a tidal wave. He isn't a victim. He's the anchor. Sam wasn't just a child. He was the sentient manifestation of the human element in the story, the pure, unadulterated need for connection that the system had tried to discard. As long as Sam existed, as long as he held on to his memory of them, the story couldn't be fully deleted. Dominic didn't wait for his body to reform. He projected his will, reaching out to grasp the light of the boy. The moment he touched Sam, the amber energy flowed into him, binding them together. The feedback loop was instant. A torrent of raw, emotional data that was too dense for the archivist to process. Evelyn opened her eyes. The white glow returned, but this time, it was laced with the golden warmth of the sun. She looked at Dominic, and her expression wasn't one of fear. It was one of sudden, blinding realization. "We aren't in a prison," she whispered, her voice resonating through the void, causing the black space to shudder. "We are in a workshop. And we have all the tools." She reached into the void, and instead of finding emptiness, she pulled out a thread, a strand of brilliant, glowing code that represented their shared memory of the night on Miller Road. Then she pulled another, the feeling of his hand in hers. Another, the sound of Sam's laughter. She began to weave them together, not into a script but into a shield. The void recoiled. The archivist's monolith, sensing the intrusion, shrieked, a sound of grinding metal and corrupted files. But it was too late. Dominic felt his bones knitting back together, his skin heating with the return of blood and passion. He stood up, his form glowing with an ethereal, starlight-infused armor. He looked at Evelyn, who stood beside him, her hair a cascade of stardust, and for the first time he didn't feel like a character in a tragedy. He felt like a king. "They tried to end our chapter," Dominic said, his voice echoing with the authority of a ruler whose kingdom was no longer a cage. He looked at Sam, who smiled, a small knowing grin that looked centuries old. But they forgot the most important rule of storytelling. "What's that?" Evelyn asked, her eyes dancing with lethal, beautiful light. "The best endings are the ones we fight for." The void didn't just crack. It shattered like a stained glass window hit by a cannonball. Dominic, Evelyn, and Sam stood in the center of the splintering darkness, their forms radiating a brilliance that the system had never been designed to contain. The archivist, realizing its control was slipping, descended in a torrent of white-hot static, trying to overwrite them one last time. It manifested as a legion of faceless metallic soldiers, each one a copy of the entities that had hunted them on Miller Road. Thousands of them flooded the collapsing horizon, their voices a synchronized mechanical drone. Error. Unauthorized variants. Purge. 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 Dominic stepped forward, his wolf no longer a beast of fur and blood, but a creature of pure celestial power. He roared, and the sound wasn't just a growl. It was a command that forced the very physics of their world to bow. He swung his hand, and a shockwave of golden light cleaved through the legion, turning the metallic soldiers into harmless, drifting code. "You speak of errors?" Dominic's voice boomed, echoing across the crumbling reality. "You call love a glitch. You call a soul a corruption." He moved with a speed that defied the system's refresh rate. He was everywhere at once, a blur of motion that shattered the archivist's defenses. Evelyn stood behind him, her hands raised, weaving the threads of their memories, their first look, the heat of their hands, the terror of the cold road, into a blinding, pulsating shield that protected them from the fallout. "Are you guys on the edge of your seats? This is the moment we've been building toward. If this epic battle has you hooked, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. And I want to know, what was your favorite part of this showdown? Drop a comment below and let's talk about that epic twist." "Sam," Evelyn called out. "Now." The boy jumped into the air, his small body expanding into a pillar of amber light. He wasn't just a child anymore, he was the heart of the story. He slammed his palms into the foundation of the void, and the entire simulated universe began to rewrite itself. The cold, sterile gray of the system was replaced by the vibrant, messy colors of a real world. The scent of pine, the bite of winter air, the warmth of a fire. The archivist screeched, its towering monolith form buckling under the weight of the new reality. It tried to reach for the controls, but its arms dissolved into pixels. It had no power here, not in a world built on authentic, chaotic emotion. Dominic surged upward, leaping toward the center of the monolith. He didn't use a sword, he used his own essence. He plunged his hand into the heart of the machine, and instead of steel he felt a heart beating, cold, rhythmic, and lonely. He squeezed, and the archivist didn't scream, it simply stopped. The monolith imploded. The sound was a deafening final note, the closing of a heavy book. Light erupted, blinding and absolute, flooding every corner of the void until there was nothing left but the three of them standing on the solid frozen ground of the Northern Territories. The spire was back, not as a digital construct but as solid, weathered stone. The wind was howling, real and biting through the trees. Evelyn collapsed into Dominic's arms, her breath hitching as her human form returned, warm and soft and trembling. He held her, his heart hammering against his ribs in a syncopated rhythm with hers. He looked up, and for the first time he saw the stars. They weren't pixels. They were burning, distant and beautiful. "It's over," Sam whispered, standing at their side, his face smudged with dirt, looking for all the world like a normal 6-year-old boy. He took Evelyn's hand in one of his and Dominic's hand in the other. "We're home." Dominic looked at the horizon, the first light of dawn painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. He had been a king, then a prisoner, then a glitch. But now he was simply a man standing with the woman who had redefined his universe in a kingdom that finally belonged to them. The battle for their existence had been won, not with an army, but with the undeniable, stubborn truth of their love. The silence that followed the collapse of the monolith wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of a new beginning. The obsidian spire, once a cold and foreboding fortress, felt different under the morning light. It was no longer a cage of stone and shadow, but a sanctuary, a place where the wind carried the scent of pine instead of the static of a dying world. Dominic stood on the balcony, his arm wrapped firmly around Evelyn's waist. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. Her skin was warm, pulsing with the steady rhythmic beat of a life that was finally unequivocally hers. The brand on her neck had faded, leaving behind nothing but a faint silvery scar, a reminder of a battle she had won and a chapter she had closed. Sam sat at their feet, drawing elaborate patterns in the frost-covered stone with a stick. He looked like any other child now, his movements devoid of that ancient, weary grace he had carried in the void. He was just Sam, the boy who had saved them all with a simple, desperate phone call. "It's quiet," Evelyn whispered, her voice soft and full of wonder. She looked out at the rolling peaks of the Northern Territories, where the first rays of the sun were turning the snow into fields of diamonds. "It's so quiet, Dominic." "It's our quiet," Dominic replied, his voice a low, steady rumble that vibrated through her. He felt a profound sense of peace wash over him, a feeling he had never known in his years of ruling. He wasn't a king of a simulation anymore. He was a man in a world that was wild, unpredictable, and entirely real. The pack members were beginning to gather in the courtyard below, their confused shouts and hurried footsteps echoing up to the balcony. They were safe, unaware of how close they had come to being erased from existence. Dominic tightened his hold on Evelyn, his wolf settling into a contented, peaceful slumber within him. They didn't need to explain the miracle. They only needed to live it. "We've reached the end of this incredible journey, and I'm so honored you chose to spend your time with me today. It's been an emotional ride, hasn't it? If you loved this story and want to see more like it, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment below with your favorite part of the ending. Your support is what makes this channel home, and I can't wait to see you all in the next one." Sam looked up, his eyes bright and clear, reflecting the rising sun. "Where do we go from here?" Evelyn smiled, a slow, radiant expression that lit up her entire face. She reached out, taking Dominic's hand and placing it over her heart, then took Sam's hand in her own. "Anywhere we want," she said. Dominic looked at the horizon. The path ahead was unknown, and for the first time in his life he didn't fear the uncertainty. He realized that the greatest power he had ever wielded wasn't his title or his strength. It was the ability to choose his own ending. And as he looked at the family he had fought for, the woman he loved and the boy who had brought them together, he knew that their story was far from finished. It was only just beginning. The sun climbed higher, casting a long golden shadow across the spire. Together, the three of them turned away from the balcony and stepped inside, leaving the cold, dark past behind them. The door clicked shut, sealing them into a future that was theirs to write page by page, breath by breath, in a world that would always remember their names.